Welcome, 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 everyone, to our new series started this year called Lunching with the League. It is our hope that you'll hear from lots of different leaders around the State House and various policymaking circles. Next, I just want to make sure you know February 8th is when we will have lawmaker Christina Rogner. We're very thrilled to be hearing from her. Also, just a reminder that we do have our community mapping webinar tonight at 7 o'clock. Last week, our Redistricting 101, we had about 1,500 people watching live or logging into Zoom, and super exciting. So this is a continuation of that. You can visit our website, lwvohio.org, for all of our upcoming events, to become a member, to become a donor. But right now, I am absolutely thrilled to be introducing our moderator for today, which is Ana Crawford. She's the senior associate. She's a senior associate in the litigation team for Porter Wright. She's a graduate of OSU Moritz College of Law. She is a hardworking league board member who I just love working with on all of our different things. She's a specialist in commercial litigation, voting rights, antitrust laws, employment law. So she's just an overall bright gal. Currently residing in the Cincinnati area. And with that, I'm going to go away, but also welcome to you, Mandi. We're so glad to have you. I'm going to turn it over to Ana.
Thanks, Jen, for that nice introduction. I just wanted to have everyone please join me in welcoming Mandi Grandjean. Mandi is our guest of honor today, and she is the Director of Elections and Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Secretary of State Frank LaRose. Prior to her time with the LaRose administration, Grandjean served as an attorney at Bricker and Eckler, where she focused her practice in election law, campaign finance, public policy, ballot initiatives, ethics, and compliance. So welcome, Mandi. And we're going to begin by having Mandi share a little bit about her background, and then we will move into a question and answer portion, which I'll be moderating. So I'll turn it over to you, Mandi.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for having me. It is such an honor, especially as we continue to commemorate the 100 years of women voting and all of the insanely good work that so many of you have done throughout those 100 years, but specifically in this past year of 2020. So really appreciate the honor of being with you today and representing the Secretary of State's office. As Ana said, my name's Mandi. I have been serving in my position as the Director of Elections and Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for 2 years now. It's crazy. I could not imagine 2 years going more quickly and being any more challenging. But that is the nature of the beast and the nature of the job. And it's one that I am deeply passionate about and deeply care about. I practiced somewhat like Ana in litigation in the election law space with election law, campaign finance, some government relations, and public policy work prior to joining the LaRose administration at the beginning of 2019. But really, I would say my love of democracy started much before that. I was kind of always been a nerd. I went to Miami University for undergrad, where I swam there for all 4 years, and I double majored in political science and journalism, and really enjoyed the balance of those two topics. Have always really had a deep respect for the press and the First Amendment, and that goes hand in hand with our right to vote and express ourselves politically. So really enjoyed my undergraduate education and knew that I wanted to get involved with something surrounding elections, and that was solidified for me when I did an internship in college where I worked for the U.S. Embassy of the Republic of Iraq. So I was an American working for the Iraqi embassy in Washington, and serving as U.S. media liaison. So I was using not only some of my political science degree, but also, my journalism degree. And that experience, it was in 2011 when, the United States was still occupying Iraq, was an absolutely profound experience for me in conceptualizing how special democracy truly is, and working for a fragile democracy, and understanding all of the challenges that go into that, and just how sacred the right to vote truly is something that has always has shaped my career profoundly, and really drove me to dig into, okay, we are the United States of America. How can we continue to perfect and improve our own democracy? How can we continue to improve and strengthen it? It's how can we help the public at large appreciate our democracy? And I know that's very core to the League of Women Voters, and making sure that there's education, people understand their rights, people appreciate how special it is to be able to vote, and to be able to have a representative government, is something that that experience for me really, really drove home. And so I came back and was like, oh, wow, like, what do I do with this? And I always wanted to be a lawyer, knew that I was definitely going to be a lawyer, and didn't want to stay out in DC, because I knew that if I went out and stayed in DC, I probably would never go back to law school. So came back and went to Moritz. Like Anna, I don't know when you graduated, but it was the best decision I ever made was going to Ohio State for law school. I was immersed in incredible election law program. I took every possible class that I could with Professor Ned Foley, who I'm sure has spoken to this group previously, and will in the future. And I feel that I received great training, a great education, and really had the ability to focus on a niche area of law and public policy at a very early age. So very, very, very grateful for my time at Moritz, and of course, go Buckeyes. So from Moritz, was able to, be a summer associate at Bricker, and really did choose Bricker for the fact that I could practice election law. I thought it was kind of sort of a pipe dream in law school, and one that I was, very skeptical of getting real world experience in. And during my interviews for my summer associate position, the former late managing partner, Kurt Tunnell, who is, an absolute mentor to me, and just someone who has been so special in the state of Ohio, said, hey, Mandi, like, no, you can actually practice that here, and do that work. And so that, sealed the deal for me. I got incredible experience at a very early age, and it was, the opportunity and honor of a lifetime to accept the appointment in this position at this time. And of course I think I knew that, of course, 2020 was going to be a wild ride, but never in 1,000 years could I have ever anticipated, quite the challenges that we would have seen. So really, really just starting with 2019 and our initiatives in 2019, we knew that cybersecurity and security in general was going to be a massive priority for our administration. We took, a lot of the unclassified information that came out of the 2016 election that started to be talked about, in early 19, and said, how can we set Ohio to be the nationwide leader in cybersecurity? What can we do in the state of Ohio to ensure that we are prepared for 2020? Because we know that our foreign adversaries are not stopping. We know that they are just continuing to push the pedal to the metal on really undermining our democratic process in the United States. So our first really big and something that we are so proud of and have been nationally recognized for is our work with the security directive, our first security directive that came out in the summer of 2019. And for any boards of elections who are on this Zoom right now, I'm sure you're smiling right now, because when that came out, we knew it was going to be a massive amount of work. We knew that requiring the boards of elections to fully upgrade their IT infrastructure before the 2020 primary was a huge feat. But we got the job done, and boy, am I glad we got the job done. We did a complete policy overhaul for the IT infrastructure, and also added physical security requirements in there too. And that set the foundation, right? We had to get the foundation right first, and we did. And I could not be more proud of every single board of elections in the state of Ohio for so many reasons, but specifically in 2019, to rising to the occasion. We expected these people that sometimes make, like below minimum wage in some counties to become IT, experts overnight, and take something that, they may or may not have taken seriously before incredibly serious. It was in a directive. There was no, choice. They had to comply. And we put every piece of resources that we had at the Secretary of State's office behind them to ensure that they were compliant before the primaries. So a huge accomplishment in 2019 for setting that foundation right at the outset. And we know we have data to support that the work that we did there from a cybersecurity perspective was successful. It's never mission accomplished with cybersecurity because our threats are always evolving. Our foreign adversaries are always evolving. Our domestic adversaries are always evolving. And so much like them, we have to continue to evolve to keep on track with hardening all of our infrastructure, continuing to use cutting edge education and techniques to stay on top of it. Because again, it's never mission accomplished with cybersecurity. But we have a great team, and we have the boards, completely on board with this mission of, protecting 2020 and how that will evolve. I still, obviously, I probably will never take the sticker off my laptop from CISA that's Protect 2020. And that is the mentality that we have. So we built upon that first security directive in a second directive that we commonly refer to as our HAVA directive in 2020. And that focused on the continuation of all of our cybersecurity measures. We have cybersecurity liaisons at the Secretary of State's office now that are essentially like our regional representatives as it pertains to cybersecurity, which is a great addition. We have, a physical security expert on staff at the Secretary of State's office. And that directive was really focused on the physical security of the boards, because again, we knew that 2020, we never knew what it was necessarily specifically going to entail, but we could have an idea. And physical security is something that I'm really, 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 really grateful that we focused on. We gave the boards, I think it was something like 98% of our federal dollars to upgrade their physical security. Whether it's bulletproof glass, whether it's just installing glass, whether it's, upgrading their locks and swipe systems. I mean, anything and everything that you can think of, we wanted them to do to protect not only, themselves, but also the integrity of the process, right? Bipartisan control at all times, ballots always under lock and key. So that was a huge continuation of that. But what was also something that we're so proud of with our second directive in 2020 that was building upon our first was a huge focus on accessibility. Secretary LaRose is incredibly committed to accessibility. And so we wanted to also give the boards of elections federal dollars to upgrade accessibilities at the board of elections and or early vote centers if that was necessary. And with a big focus on website accessibility too. So we have not only a full-time web accessibility employee on staff at the Secretary of State's office, Nate Fernandez, who is great. And then also a full-time ADA coordinator at the Secretary of State's office, Brett Harbage, to help the boards and get not only get into compliance with ADA, but also continue to be in compliance with ADA, and making sure that everybody can vote with integrity and secrecy as anybody else would. So these were huge priorities for us that we were able to tackle, in our first 2 years. And that's just really scratching the surface of all of the upgrades and implementations we've been able to make. Our CARES directive was a huge policy initiative, and one that I am, personally incredibly proud of, because we saw issues that we predicted happen in the November election, and we were prepared for it, requiring each board of elections to have a backup paper poll book per polling location was critical. We saw it in Franklin County. We had to fail over to the paper backups, and that was built into the process. So when you build these contingency plans, when you build in worst case scenario, it's always for the best, right? Especially in these incredibly uncertain and challenging times. So I'm very grateful, not only for our team at the Secretary of State's office and just the sheer volume of work that went into it, from, not only a public policy perspective, directives, but also thinking about what we were able to do with precinct election official recruitment in a pandemic. We set incredibly aggressive goals for the boards of elections as far as precinct election official recruitment goes, and they were able to rise to the challenge. Not one polling location did not open because there were not enough precinct election officials. And that I have to give, the league and every other voter rights group such credit for that too, because we can't do our job without you guys. We cannot do our job without the, thousands of people, that volunteered, over 35,000 people that volunteered to be precinct election officials in the state of Ohio. That is incredible when you think of the era that we're in with, COVID and this pandemic. People rose to the challenge, and it brings like tears to my eyes, just even conceptualizing that. And our boards of elections likewise worked equally hard to recruit those, patriotic Americans that were willing to serve at the polls in person on election day this year. So incredible success. I could talk about this election ad nauseum, and I will. The stats speak for themselves. 74% of registered voters cast a ballot in the state of Ohio. An absolute statewide record turnout. And again, I just can't thank, Jen and the league and every other voter rights activist group for encouraging that, engaging our populations, telling people that there's no time like right now to get engaged, right? The very foundation of our democracy depends on engagement and depends on being active in the process. And it is, I'm just so proud of that number, 74% in a pandemic. It's incredible. 8 counties in Ohio had over 80% voter turnout. Again, just incredible. I think Putnam County was, our number one voter turnout with 84%. It's remarkable, absolutely remarkable. And I know you guys know this, but we had a 94% absentee return rate. So high. We updated the forms. We had major discussions on how to make the process better. And working with the Center for Civic Design was, an incredible value add to us when we, were able to redo the forms, make them easier, take feedback from the boards of elections and say, hey, where are points of improvements for these forms? And for these envelopes to make it easier for the voter, to make it easier for you. We want every single eligible, voter to have their ballot count. And that also dovetailed into several, policy decisions that were made too, as it pertains to provisional balloting and showing up at the early vote center to vote once a voter had already, requested an absentee ballot. So we tried, and I think the data speaks for itself, to engage as much as humanly possible. Some really exciting initiatives that I know that we are going to continue is our Lawyers for Liberty program. It was very personal to me because it was sort of my passion project. And we were able to get the secretary was able to get the Ohio Supreme Court to issue a temporary rule change to allow for any precinct election official that's a lawyer to receive CLE credit for not only their training, but also their service on election day, which was huge. We had over 1,000 attorneys seek CLE credit for that, which was just incredible. And I just want to grow that even more. We engaged with breweries, we engaged with barbershops, we engaged with anyone who was willing to engage with us on recruiting precinct election officials and getting the word out that it is absolutely imperative that we vote this election. So really, really proud of everything. Obviously, I could go on for days about this election, about the challenges, about what our 88 county boards of elections were able to overcome. I mean, those people, those bipartisan people are the real American heroes. And I cannot emphasize that more, and just how grateful I am for their service, because they got the job done. They got it done under terrible circumstances. And I'm so proud of them. That's, our administration, we are 100%, committed to, improving constantly. One thing that I don't think has been ever done before, much of what we've done has never been done before, which again, Secretary LaRose is not shy at all to modernization and not shy to improvement and feedback. And the door is always open for us to hear any feedback. Our boards know that I work weekly with the OAEO, which is the association for our 88 county boards of elections and election officials statewide, have weekly calls. I mean, I don't want to, I'm not the one on the ground, they are. And so I don't ever want to assume that, something we're doing, I might think it's a great idea, or, Secretary LaRose might think it's a great idea, but, we don't ever want to do that without talking to them and in that partnership, in the same vein. And I know, I just received the league's comments on our EOM changes. And again, that's such valuable information to me and such valuable feedback. We want to hear what you guys have to say. And we are just so grateful for the partnership. But we conducted at a staff level 88 after action reviews. So I'm in the haze. You guys can all appreciate this because I slept in my office for like 2 days. I am in the haze of post-election, not even really on this planet, mentally, with just the lack of sleep and stress and everything. And we pretty much immediately, because obviously the secretary is a Green Beret, and a lot of our processes are, based on things that he learned in the military to be successful. And he's totally right. After action reviews are critical to our success, and we do one after every major event. And I think it was on Thursday, had our, senior staff after action review. And he, asked me, he said, Mandi, like, is it possible? I want to do an after action review about every single county board of elections. And I said, yeah, sir, I can't conceptualize that right now, but of course we will get the job done. And so we worked, my team and our regional team worked to literally discuss every single board of elections performance and provide every single board of elections with feedback on their performance. And sometimes it was just, look, you did a great job. I don't have anything to say other than you did a great job and keep up the good work. But in other capacities, it was, there needs to be some serious improvements here. And here's a letter outlining what I need to see back, what we need to see back for improvements, whether that's traffic issues or, just improving any processes that we heard about was really, really important. And so we're just at the tail end of that after action process. But I guess that just goes to show how serious we are about feedback, how serious we are about improvement. Elections aren't perfect. but we can always strive for perfection, and we can always strive for improvement. And I know that each and every one of our county boards of elections is committed to that as well, because we all are in this to serve the Ohio voter. We are all in this to make sure that, you know, every eligible voter can cast their ballot and do so, you know, securely, accurately, fairly, and that there is integrity surrounding our election. And I know that that was mission accomplished after this election. And I'm just incredibly, incredibly proud of it, incredibly proud to work for Secretary LaRose and to work for our 88 county boards of elections, and most importantly, the voters of Ohio. So I know that you said that you wanted to go into Q&A, and I am talking, and I could just talk forever about this. And I just hope that I know when I was talking to Mike in our prep session, in this climate, I hope that this audience knows that we are so much more similar than we are different. And we are truly in this together for, you know, the betterment of our democratic process and upholding the integrity of it. And again, Democrat, Republican, I'm just extraordinarily proud of each and every one of our election officials in the state of Ohio. They had to undergo an insane amount of pressure publicly, personally, even the personal struggles that our election officials, you know, went through with their own families, you know, throughout this election cycle, and still got the job done. I mean, if that doesn't give you hope, for, you know, our process and the way things work in Ohio and how we get along in the state of Ohio, I mean, I don't know what will. It gives me hope on a daily basis, and it gives me faith moving forward that we have good people in the state, and we have good people who are committed to making our democracy even better and protecting it.
Thanks so much, Mandi. We have gotten so many great questions from the participants, and I have some questions, so I wanted to jump right in so we can get to as many as possible. So the first one is related to what you were just speaking about. There was substantial disinformation relating to election administration during the 2020 election. What do you see the Secretary of State's role in alleviating a significant portion of the public's suspicions relating to election administration?
That is a fantastic question. And so let me back up a little bit, because obviously I think I would need 10 years to go through everything that we've done over the past 2 years, but specifically on mis and disinformation. So going back to December of 2019, for the first time ever, the Secretary of State's office brought together, this was pre-pandemic, like physically together, all 88 county boards of elections, representatives from each. We brought in DHS, we brought in the FBI, we brought in all of our national, state, and local security partners for what we refer to as a security briefing. And mis and disinformation was at the top of the topic. And candidly, we didn't stop talking about it from that point forward. We knew that that was the biggest tactic that the Russians had, right? In 2016 was this, you know, mis and disinformation on social media and other outlets. That was their ploy, right? To have a bunch of different bots spreading incorrect information, you know, and making it appear like it was from a viable source. So we had to educate our Board of Elections first, right? We had to say, look, this is what we're seeing. This is what, you know, our partners are seeing, and here's what we're going to do to try to address it. And so in coordination with NAS, which is the National Secretaries of State, so an association that represents secretaries of state nationwide, which is obviously bipartisan, and NASCED, which is the Elections Directors Association, so the MIA in every other state, you know, came together to establish trusted sources and trusted info. So it's like a hashtag that was in really a public campaign with CISA to say, look, the only trusted source, not only, but like the number one trusted source for election information is going to be your election official, right? It's going to be the source. And please, you know, media, everybody that's engaged in this process, please go to the election official first. So establishing that, and part of that too was making, we required each board of elections to have a Twitter and a Facebook, and make sure that that was verified with Facebook and Twitter. And so we worked with the social media networks to do that, because what we did not want to happen is, let's say a nefarious actor, because the board didn't have a Facebook, that they make one that's like basically like a mock of it, and it's spreading mis and disinformation, right? Like, I mean, that's like an absolute worst case scenario. So we started with the boards, and then we started with our advocate friends too. So the secretary established the DEC, so the Diversity and Empowerment Council within the Secretary of State's office, which is amazing, and led by Monique Moore in our shop, who is tremendous. And we gave them a briefing too. So, that they could go back to their communities and populations and say, no, that I'm hearing this from the Secretary of State's office, please seek out the information from them, or contact me and I will get the information for you, because we need to know about mis and disinformation immediately. And we need to know about it, and we need to be able to swat it down very, very quickly. And so we had an entire operation, including with our board, like, so for our public reporting of mis and disinformation, there's a specific email address that we had publicized with, everyone, to say, if you are a member of the public, if you are a member of any group, we don't care, and you are seeing mis and disinformation out there, report it to, report@ohiosos.gov. And then we immediately worked with our state and federal and local law enforcement officials to report that, so that they can take it up their chain of command. And then we worked with our counterparts at the social media companies to make sure that they knew too. So we were working through their policies. Simultaneously, more in my section, was the boards of elections. So in our security directive, there's an absolute requirement that they report any security event to our office immediately. I don't care if it's like a physical disruption, mis and disinformation, it's an absolute requirement. And so that when they report to me that event, whatever it is immediately sent to our state, local, and federal partners. So we are very serious about mis and disinformation. And oftentimes, if there was mis or disinformation, it was taken down within 24 hours. So I know I had a lot of personal friends actually sending me stuff too. And I was so excited, because normally I'm just getting the information and passing it along. But for once, I was the one passing along the information and saying, this needs to be taken down immediately, because it's like, I'm literally seeing it on my personal account, as far as like a separate, Instagram account saying that, if you didn't do X, Y, or Z, your ballot wouldn't count, which is, absolutely incorrect. And it was taken down, within 24 hours. So very serious about mis and disinformation. And that's what we did do. Going forward, I mean, our processes really worked, but I will tell you, something that Secretary LaRose says all the time is, informed voters inform voters. And so some of our biggest initiatives are going to be, again, communicating with groups like the League, making sure that you guys have the most up-to-date and accurate information about what is going on with election administration. What are the hours for early voting? What, that information, so you guys can inform your populations. And then there's, we're informing the public and saying, no, if something doesn't sound right, it's probably not right. So contact our office, report it as mis and disinformation. But continuing that civics as education, I think, is going to be absolutely critical. There is just so much information out there constantly that I think there's, sometimes sensory overload, right? And there's so many sources that have gotten so good at masking themselves as the legitimate source when they're just not. So I mis and disinformation is so beyond, as is everything in election administration. It's so beyond, partisan politics. It's absolutely critical that voters have accurate information.
Thanks, Mandi. And that leads me to a related question. In 2020, the League of Women Voters of Ohio estimates we provided nonpartisan voting information to 1 million Ohioans. How do you think voter education will change in the future? What are the main improvements for voter engagement, registration, and participation that your office is planning going forward?
Yeah. So again, I think continuing every single initiative that we created from 2019 on, and building that out even further. So again, we're in this weird place with the pandemic. But there's also, in some ways, there's some positiveness about it because sometimes you can reach more people, right? Like somebody might be able to get on a Zoom a lot easier than they would be able to come somewhere in person. So continuing to use virtual platforms to educate people, absolutely. Continuing to, when it's safe, have meetings, have conversations, get in front of people, continuing our PSA work. We're a member of ERIC, so continuing to, send our eligible but unregistered mailings, all of the initiatives that we've continued to do, but just expanding them even more is certainly something that we're, committed to. And I know the secretary is very passionate about. He could talk about voting and civics education and civility all day long. And so just getting him in front of even more people, even though his schedules are, he's already in front of people all the time, but even at a staff level, just making sure that people have as much information as possible. And then having the same charge for the boards of elections, making sure that they are engaging and educating the public at a local level is going to be so important too, because they're the ones on the ground. They're the ones with the personal relationships with their voters, right? And so I want to make sure that they're equipped with the information that they need and continue to educate folks, right? Even in schools, going to social studies classes, government classes. That's all stuff that we did for the past 2 years, but just continuing to do that and expand it out even more if possible.
Yeah, do you think that voting systems, voter registration databases, and other aspects of the election operation system will eventually be more centralized at the Secretary of State office away from the Board of Elections? Why or why not? And what do you see as the pros and cons?
Oh, you asked the right person this question. So I think I think Jen's on, obviously, but she's probably laughing right now because
I think this was her question.
Yeah, she knows that this is, a huge topic for me. So just for everybody on the line, I'm going to give some education so I don't just speak and people are like, I don't even know what you're talking about. So way in the weeds of election administration is voter registration. And Ohio is one of, the number has been fluctuating because I think, it's so little, but between 4 and 6 states. So the absolute minority of all states, that is what is referred to as bottom up. And what does bottom up mean, right? It's this kind of like wonky term. Bottom up means that in Ohio, every county board of elections maintains the voter registration data. We do not at the Secretary of State's office. They have the system, literally the technological system, and they input the data, right? And they control the data and they control essentially the action surrounding the data. So we are essentially completely, hands off as it pertains to what occurs at the local level with voter registration. Layering on top of that is that Ohio is decentralized, meaning the county board of elections can choose what vendor it wants to have for voter registration, right? So that's kind of like a double layer of challenges, at least from a state perspective, on voter registration. So people will say, well, you have the statewide voter registration database. And that's one of the most common things that I hear. And, to give some education, yes, we do have the statewide voter registration database because we have online voter registration. All the statewide voter registration databases is a replica of the county system, right? I can't touch, I have no control over the actual micro data in the statewide voter registration database. The county board of elections does. So that's kind of just setting the stage. And so that makes things difficult, right? It makes things like list maintenance and, the unprecedented transparency that Secretary LaRose has led with as far as transparency goes with list maintenance, really, really hard because I don't maintain that data. All I can do is ask the boards for it. And that's what our statewide voter registration database is too. So I think, Secretary LaRose had worked with the legislature to introduce Senate Bill 194 in the last GA, and is absolutely something that is a priority and a huge passion project of mine, because currently in Ohio, there is what we refer to as the Board of Voting Machine Examiners, the BVME. And it's a bipartisan board that's established in state law that's on top of the EAC, which I'm seeing elections is all acronyms. So I try to stop myself and define an acronym. So apologies, especially for those in the chat. Like, I will try to pause and explain what it is. The EAC is the Election Administration Commission or Council or whatever. It's the organization that Congress set up to have testing and certification for voting systems. But that's really all it is voting systems, right? And since we're in 2021 and there's, so much technology as it relates to voting, they don't have standards for other equipment. It's just the voting systems. And so the BVME in Ohio is a board that has an additional layer of oversight on top of the EAC that certifies voting systems and changes to voting systems, and e-poll books, which is an expansion of the federal certification in the state of Ohio. And so we think the BVME is great, and we think that additional level of certification is critical. We just don't think it goes far enough, right? And that was the whole thing with Senate Bill 194 is voter registration systems have never been certified or really held to any sort of standards in the state of Ohio, because there hasn't been the guidelines developed for it. And so one of the biggest flaws that I saw in our system was the lack of having voter registration systems and really any other election equipment under the purview of the BVME. We absolutely need security standards and certification requirements for that equipment because it touches critical infrastructure. So it just makes sense. So we really that bill expands the BVME and brings voter registration systems under the purview of the BVME and gives the ability to set standards. So, absolutely. There's so much we want to do with voter registration and modernizing it. But a first step is even just having those criteria to say, no, like, we understand that Ohio in its present form under law is bottom up and decentralized. But with that being said, there still are minimal standards and requirements that the vendors need to meet before they can, operate in Ohio. That would be, our ideal scenario. And that's what Senate Bill 194 did to make it even more secure, right? So hoping, I think the goal is to have that reintroduced. And so any, support that the league, Jen can give that is helpful, because that is such an important bill to move that ball forward as it pertains to the security of our voter registration systems and just having data integrity, having, standards that everybody's aware of and that everybody can meet. That's going to be a huge win for us. Hopefully we can get it done and move forward with that. But yeah, I think it probably just speaks for itself that Ohio is only one of 4 to 6 states that have this bottom up system. And I think there's a lot of improvements that can be made with it.
Yeah. Thanks, Mandi. So along those lines, how far away do you think we are from online voter registration?
You mean absentee applications?
Yes. And for online voter registration as well. We've had a couple of questions about how far off.
So we have online voter registration currently. And you can go to,
Sorry, I was muted.
oh, what were you saying? Sorry.
Sorry, I was muted. Go ahead.
Yeah, so online voter registration exists in Ohio. So you can go online at voteohio.gov and check your registration now. You can update it online and you can register to vote online too. So we do have that in the state of Ohio, which has been in existence, before our administration even came in. So that was great. But as far as online absentee applications, that's certainly something that the secretary has advocated before and will continue to do so. So I can't speak to necessarily like how close we are to it, just because I don't know, what the legislature will or will not do, but it's something that we're absolutely, supportive of, and is, a priority item for the secretary.
Okay, thanks. And then we've had several questions about redistricting. So I'm going to try and encompass these all into one multi-part question. So we now have had a chance to implement the 2015 and 2018 Fair District ballot initiatives. Do you have a sense of how Secretary LaRose will be approaching his role in redistricting? And currently we are asking Ohio leaders to commit to do their part in ending partisan gerrymandering. Can you make that pledge, and how might you use your position to support a transparent map process?
Yeah, so obviously I'm not the Secretary of State. I'm just the elections director. So I can just kind of speak to the process as far as I know it. And of course, we haven't gone through this process before, but Secretary LaRose is committed to transparency always. And I think that that's been evident in his list maintenance approach and all of the improvements that have been made there. But I think it sounds like you guys had a session on redistricting, but I can kind of go through sort of like what the setup is. And of course, we have redistricting for the General Assembly seats, so at a statewide level, and then we have redistricting for Congress. And really, this won't happen until the federal census is completed and the data is released to the states. So, I think with the constitutional amendments that will, that were made to the Ohio Constitution, there's a new process, and there's the redistricting commission that the governor, the Secretary of State, the auditor, Speaker appointee, Senate President appointee, House Minority appointee, and Senate Minority appointee lead. So bipartisan redistricting commission, and it is a process that is pretty, specifically laid out in that constitutional amendment. And it's slightly different for the General Assembly process than it is the congressional process. But, it requires, minority, it requires input from the minority political party, essentially, in that process. So, I know the secretary is obviously on the commission and their staff that will be associated with the commission, but I think we're still in the processing phase of, planning, starting the conversations of planning for that process. But it is, one that he certainly is just a member of, right? So it takes also the governor, auditor, and the General Assembly's appointees as well. So that's, I can go through kind of like the nitty gritty of like what the constitutional amendment lays out, but I also don't want to bore you guys to death. Not that it's,
I think we'll,
not that it's boring.
Our question was mostly about the transparency piece. So another question that I wanted to get to is a couple people asked about the 98,000 people who were removed from the voter rolls just last week. Can you share how that was carried out?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, so just to go backwards so that we all are on the same page as far as like history goes, because history, this process is so complicated that you have to understand how it started. And so back in 2016, when the former administration issued the directive that required each county board of elections to send confirmation notices to those who are identified in the NCOA process and also the supplemental process back in 2016. So it was like the 2-year look back in 2016 for the supplemental process. And then those who appeared on the NCOA list in 2016 were to receive a confirmation notice. So that set the two federal general election or 4-year clock looking forward to that time period, right? So that's how it started, if that makes sense. It's always starts, well before it's completed. So I know that's kind of confusing and in the weeds, but I think it's always important to like acknowledge, why we are where we are, and we are where we are now because of that 2016 directive. So that started the clock for this process that is required not only by state law but also by federal law as well. So what we wanted to do, in the spirit of transparency and thinking creatively and getting as many people engaged in the process as possible, is we wanted to issue a directive as soon as possible, outlining what data we wanted from the boards to be able to publish an initial list to make sure that we engaged with and we partnered with, our activist groups and our DEC members, and anyone who was willing to partner with us to go look for these people and get them to update their registration, or if they were supposed to be canceled because they moved out of state or what have you, that was done, because maintaining accurate voter rolls is absolutely critical to the integrity of the process. So we issued a directive in August that said on August 7th, and I only remember that because it was my birthday, of course, issuing a directive then, was that they were required to provide us with their list of those at that moment, because this is it's never static, right? It's voter list maintenance is always moving, and the boards are updating their data always. And voters are engaging in different voter activities. So you have to look at this in like a snapshot of time, which is why it's so complicated. So we said, you must submit your lists of those who are set to be canceled, are not, but at that moment in time, but are set to be canceled by August 14th. So we gathered all of that list and put it up on our website and published it on August 28th, and said, look, league, everyone, press release, blah, 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 like public, please, for the love of God, vote in, the November 3rd, 2020 general election. But even if you're not going to vote, update your voter registration, right? And there's no time like the present. Please do it. We're giving you, all of this time and all of this, public information to be able to do so. So that's what we did. And we partnered and we were able to reduce the list by about 10,000 registrations, which is a huge win. And much of that thanks goes to, people like Jen and Common Cause and all of our other activist groups who took the list and said, I'm going to look at this list and I'm going to go see, does this person, we're going to call them, we're going to send them something, we're going to show up on their doorstep, whatever, to make sure that if they are there, that they update their voter registration, because we want every single person who is eligible to, be a voter in the state of Ohio to be a voter in the state of Ohio. So absolutely innovative. And I've talked about this nationwide, through different organizations like the Bipartisan Policy Center, and NASA and NASED, because we really did innovate this process. And so many states are copying us now, which is a huge testament to, this group, and so many others, because they saw how effective it was. I mean, to be able to reduce your list by that much, just by getting people engaged and making it more transparent, is a huge win. So we're really happy about that. And we also, had an inordinate amount of checks that we did on the list that the boards of elections sent us, because remember, I can't change anything. It's all of that power is maintained at the Board of Elections, and all of that data is housed at the Board of Elections. So all we can do is look at it and say, this looks right, or, there needs to be some work done on this. But we made sure that, the list was as accurate as, it has ever been previously before. So really happy about, re-engaging, at least 10,000 people in registrations. That's huge. And super successful, and simultaneously making sure that Ohio voter rolls, stay accurate, and uphold the integrity of the system.
Thanks so much, Mandi. I think we're about at the end of your time. So I wanted to thank you for taking part in our discussion today. And if you wanted to have a final comment, a couple people have asked where they can find additional information on ballot data and information like that. So maybe you could address that at one final thought.
Yeah. So final thought is this: if you've gotten nothing more than listening to me babble on for the last hour, I hope it's that, there are good people, regardless of, political affiliation, in this space, that are 100% committed to the democratic process in Ohio and upholding the integrity of it, and would do anything, to keep that sacred ideal that our country was founded on, upheld. So in this insane climate, I hope that you have a sense of hope for that, and gratitude towards our 88 county boards of elections and precinct election officials who volunteered in the worst possible circumstances. So I hope it gives you a sense of renewed faith and hope. But our website has everything that you could possibly imagine on it. It is at voteohio.gov. There's the elections tab that you can go to and see anything that you want, results, our audit rate for our audit accuracy rate for the presidential election was 99.98%, which is pretty incredible. So whenever anybody's questioning you, you can point to that. We have data and science in the state of Ohio that supports, that our election was done well and done right. And so I thank the league very much. I thank every single volunteer on this call. We are all in this together, and I hope that we, the next goal is, let's break 74%, right? Like, let's get even more people engaged. And we are absolutely committed to doing so in the LaRose administration. So thank you guys so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure. If you have any questions, please get a hold of Jen. She knows how to get to me. And I'm happy to answer any question. Ana, thank you so much for moderating and having me.
Thanks, Mandi. Bye, everyone.